we've been saying so much lately that like, oh yeah, we've had this one on the docket since day one. We've always wanted to do this episode, but actually not so much. This popped up relatively recently, and
right.
it even popped up
I
independently.
I had said like we Kony'd Aquino when we were talking about, or sorry, Aquino. I'm going back to calling him Aquino when we were talking about, you know, the podcast one day, like at the end of the year, I guess it was like during tax season. We were talking about, you know, good things that have come of the podcast, and I was like, you know, Aquino, like people, you know, we Kony'd him, like kind of referencing it, but then like I guess. We
made him famous.
Yeah, we made him. But then, like, I guess in the aftermath of that, like, we were, like, you know, talking about it, and we realized, like, people don't really remember this, like, Kony 2012, like, you know, itself, you know.
No. A lot of people don't. Even millennials, who were kind of the target audience of Kony 2012, I talked to a few, and we're like, wait, what was that? Or they have, like, the vaguest memory of it.
Right, which is crazy.
It is crazy.
Yeah.
Like,
I think you were saying it was the most popular, like, viral video at the time. Like,
yes.
It was extremely popular.
Well, yeah, today, I mean, we're going to get into all facets of Kony 2012, but one big aspect of it is the kind of internet or mimetic history aspect of Kony 2012, because you're right. It was in March 2012, when it debuted on YouTube, in a matter of like several days, it became the most watched YouTube video of all time, with I think over, you know, I think these numbers don't sound so big today, but I think they got over 100 million views in like 72 hours or something for this 30-minute film.
Right. And it was like important too. It wasn't like Badger Mushroom or like what does the fox say or whatever. It was like, you know, this is politically important, you know, or something like that, right? Yeah,
this was a big deal. This got picked up immediately by the press, and it led to this like storm of media coverage, and we'll talk shortly about like how it started and how it ended up. But, you know, I just looked up for some reason, well, because this is the 10-year anniversary of Kony 2012, there's been some retrospectives on it. And I guess YouGov, the polling company, did a poll just in the last month or two about memory of Kony 2012 with U.S. adults. And they asked, how much, if anything, do you remember hearing about a 2012 viral online video produced by Invisible Children about an African warlord named Joseph Kony who kidnaps children into his militant army? And 65% of respondents remembered nothing at all. 25% remembered a little, and 10% remembered a lot. So yeah, I mean, 2/3 of the country has it's gone right down the memory hole. But for a minute there, if you were online, especially if you were like a pretty online millennial who was on things like Facebook or Twitter or Reddit, God forbid, in 2012, as I think I was still on Reddit and Facebook, you know, back then. I think 2012 was the last year before I think I defected from Facebook and just couldn't take it anymore. And Kony 2012 honestly was like one of the precipitating factors of that. I remember like rage posting about Kony 2012 like a couple days after it came out. I guess I'm mildly proud to say that I was not psyoped by it, and instead I was like deeply triggered, as were like millions of people particularly on the African continent, you know, for its alleged.
There was immediately a lot of backlash, like
there
to
was
it for a good reason. I
good
rewatched it, like, you know, in preparation for this episode, and at the time it was galling, but I feel like in retrospect, like even more so. I mean, it's like the epitome of like white boy goes to Africa, like colonialist sort of white savior complex, like
the apotheosis
narcissism
of fucking white boy goes to Africa. Like there, it's like The Room of white boy goes to Africa. It's almost like this savant, like auteurist, narcissistic vision of this guy, Jason Russell, who stars, you know, basically is like kind of the head of Invisible Children, and very prominently stars in Kony 2012, along with his adorable blonde-haired 5-year-old son, Gavin, who he uses as like a chief like narrative device throughout. And a lot of people did kind of clap back against this movie, like in the days after it was released. And then within just 10 days, 10 days, and you know, the pitch, I mean, we'll kind of break down. We'll probably walk through Kony 2012 in a minute to really, because there's so much shit like packed into that 30 minutes. But it was all supposed to culminate, I think, on, and I mean, come on, listeners, I am shaking.
Cover the night.
Cover the night. I'm shaking my head on Hitler's birthday, April 20th.
Yeah, which was also the anniversary of like a massacre, like
Columbine.
Right,
also Columbine in and Uganda, also what an LRA
I
massacre
think so.
as well. So it's on April 20th, and basically they wanted the people watching the video to order these action kits for $30, where you get a T-shirt, some bumper stickers, and a wristband, and on April 20th, everybody across, pretty much the Western world would run out and plaster the city full of Kony posters. And then the morning after, like, Kony would be famous, etc.
Yes, the Adiac massacre of April 20th, 1995, by the way. That was the one.
Okay. Yeah, I wonder if that's why they picked it. I wonder if that's why they picked it.
Maybe, but it's still kind of like weird.
It is weird.
Yeah.
But then, like, they never even got, because I think this came out on, like, in the middle of March in 2012. And so they were, basically saying that, in less than a month from now, we're going to have this big global event, and then blah, blah, and all these great things are going to happen, and then we're going to catch Kony. And, but only 10 days. We're going to catch him.
Yeah.
Put him on the front page of the New York Times. That's the fantasy, or whatever he says.
Yeah.
But only 10 days after that, the founder and figurehead of this whole movement, Jason Russell, is filmed by multiple people running through the streets of San Diego, butt naked, kind of almost like finger snapping and voguing and just yelling about
he was
random
serving
shit
a little bit.
He was serving.
He was nakedly serving, and he muttering to himself about like the devil, literally.
The devil. Literally the devil. And was taken in on a 5150 whole psychiatric
and
hold.
slamming his hands on the ground like as hard as he could.
And according to some people,
like
masturbating,
an ape, kind of like a monkey, like trying to smash like an anthill or something with a rock. I don't know. That's like kind of what it was like.
It was. He went primal. He went altered states primal, like caveman, and. And then the video got, picked up by TMZ. And then just as fast as Kony 2012 became this like epic bacon, like activism sensation, it became this huge fucking joke. Like this big, just like, haha, like the meme of him running around naked, which at this point, people already were kind of getting themselves prepped for some Schadenfreude. Like based on his sort of whole affect and attitude.
Yeah, I mean, he had already sort of been canceled, but this was just like, it was like chef's kiss situation. Like it was too perfect. Like he, like very rarely does, and it really like cascaded into a complete collapse of the entire thing. And like when like Cover the Night finally happened, like no one showed up.
Nobody. Basically,
the whole thing just like crumbled. Weirdly enough, like there was like, some, I mean, it was kind of like overblown by Invisible Children, the organization, the Kony 2012 organization that Jason Russell founded. But like in the like aftermath, there was a little bit of like push to go like help the Ugandan military like get Kony, even though at the time like Kony had basically like the presence of the LRA had like more or less evaporated from Uganda and wasn't that strong in the neighboring countries either. Which was part of what was so bizarre about it. But I don't know. Yeah. I mean,
that was one of many critiques people made is that the movie does not explain that at all because it's trying to hype it up and like tug on your heartstrings as aggressively as possible and not get into messy specifics about anything, any of the political context of like this conflict. There's a bad man, like he tells Gavin.
Yeah, and we have to stop him, like not kill. Yeah, exactly. Like he talks to his own. Yeah, we should talk about the thing. I mean, I feel like on one level, like this is a phenomenon that I feel like I've observed many times where it's like a bizarre repeating pattern where like basically, I mean, as soon as I started listening to this, like I will admit, like I myself like was pretty unplugged. Like I did remember it. Like I definitely would have answered like, yes, I remember it to that polling question. But I honestly didn't even remember his breakdown until you mentioned it to me. I just remember it being like this weird cringe thing. And I didn't remember much of the documentary itself at all or what the guy was even like. And when I listened to it, like the minute I heard his voice, I was like, this guy's a failed actor. You know who he kind of reminded me of? He reminded me of like that guy who like was like hashtag walk away, you know, from the Democrats, you know, like I used to be a liberal, like that type of thing where it's like a weird bid for attention.
Only
to
vaguely
like,
remember that guy.
yeah, I don't know, maybe. But anyway, it was a similar kind of like failed actor, like dynamic. I mean, that guy was openly gay. I mean, I'm not saying this guy's gay. Maybe he just has that. Anyway, he's like a theater kid.
We'll
obviously.
get into that. Yeah, he's not just a failed actor. He is a like intergenerational theater kid. And not only that, an intergenerational evangelical Christian theater kid. Which, you know, we'll probably delve deeper into that background because it is relevant, I think.
Yeah. I feel like that's this is, you know, on one level, like on the surface level, this is like that recurring phenomenon that I've seen like many times where like a theater kid type, like a church choir type, who, you know, maybe is like a bit out of place or for whatever reason, you know, take them at their word about like anything in terms of the that dimension of certain things. But like, you know what I mean? Like, but they go to Africa, like to try to find their place, like in their religion. And then like they come back like really inspired with some kind of project that's like all about them. Something there's this another musical, like he repeatedly would say that after he was done doing this he wanted to do like a Hollywood musical. I remember there was another thing like that was on Broadway a while ago, like called Witness Uganda, literally like Witness Uganda, and it was a similar story where like a dude, I mean he was openly gay, but like this dude, you know, went to Uganda and like, you know, met some kids there that he really wanted to help. I mean, it was less grandiose and like stopping Kony, but it was still the same type of thing where it's like, this is like, I'm gonna be altruistic, but I'm going to like, you know, but really it's just a vehicle for their own like need to be a, you know, like a star, like, you know, to be on stage, like but that's like the surface level. But there's also something like deeply sus about it where it like justifies like US intervention in Africa in
quite
ways
literally.
that are like are totally tangential to like the nebulous goal of like quote unquote stopping Kony. And it's linked into something that goes back actually like a long time, far before like 2012, like the, you know, US geopolitical interest in that area of Africa, basically from the like the end of the Cold War, because it's next to Sudan, you know, it's like, and that kind of dovetails with the evangelical missionary interest there, you know. But anyway,
sure.
so
for sure, we'll kind of get into that, some of the deeper lore about like Ugandan geopolitics and stuff, which is like none of which is even like so much as hinted at in any of the Invisible Children.
I mean, it wouldn't be to their advantage to do so at all.
No, it wouldn't. And there's actually a really interesting, complicated sort of story there, you know, with their longtime president. I mean, even, you know, like Idi Amin obviously was in control of the country in the 70s and was like sort of a U.S. ally, but then became like a Gaddafi ally. And this is a huge zone of contestation for the kind of, you know, the more reactionary wings of, you know, the OAU and the sort of Nkrumahist combating neocolonialism, like socialist strains, you know, going on in the continent at the time. And it all ties in, like, actually in a lot of ways with kind of like Jason Russell's whole subliminal jihad, but especially with the longtime president now, Yoweri Museveni, who has had an interesting career, to say the least. But also the thing, maybe we'll get to it at the end, but the fact that like justifying U.S. military intervention, that was something that I had a kind of a sus inkling of back in 2012, that this felt very strange and like convenient for the U.S. military, because what was getting started around that time under, you know, first term Obama was AFRICOM. You know, the U.S. was stepping up their military, particularly their like special operations footprint all over Africa, you know, mostly under the guise of combating Islamic terrorism, something that we still see going on today. It's only expanded in the last like 10 years. But I forgot that like the explicit goal that is outlined in Kony 2012 is to like get U.S. Special Forces sent to like hunt down Kony.
Exactly.
That's
Like,
really
they were-
the mechanism of action here.
Yeah, it was so funny, like seeing them saying like, what did they say? They were like, because there's no actual like material like U.S. interest to like intervene militarily there, like or something like that. I mean, obviously it's absurd because it's coming from people who believed at the time that there was like an active U.S. military interest. I mean, it's weird because it was 2012, so there was kind of like the sentiment was sort of shifting away from that, like the idea that we should be like interventionists in the world. But I mean, a lot of FOPO people were still like opposed. But I mean, it's like bizarre but they were like, no, like we will not stand for it. Like you must invade Uganda.
Well, that's actually interesting because I think he brings it up also in, I don't know if you watched it, but Kony 2012 Part 2 Beyond Famous, which I think he released that like. It might have even been like a week after the first Kony movie dropped. He released this second one that is kind of low key, like it's responding to some of the criticism that they've kind of gotten and stuff. But then, like at one point, there's like this slick infographic that is like, people say we shouldn't do anything, but the UN has ratified a concept called responsibility to protect, which is completely awesome, and we should invoke it to like go. It's just like, oh my god, there's like some psycho Samantha Power like lib imperialism basically going on, which like you would see it blossom in Libya, in Syria, and in other places like throughout the rest of the Obama administration. But it's like he's just invoking this this like R2P kind of Susan Rice, like Samantha Power kind of neoliberal imperialism kind of thing. And really also, you're right though, it was kind of a weird interregnum in the first Obama term, because there was this sense that like we had defeated the bad man, or the bad men, Bush and Cheney, and we were kind of like pulling out of Iraq, and we got
Bin Laden.
We got Bin Laden. This came out, right after.
We got him. Stopped him. Yeah.
But you had there's all these people that pop up in it that are kind of like almost like celebrity kind of NGO activist types, like guys like John Prendergast, and I don't know if Sean Penn pops up in the original Kony. Maybe he pops up in the part 2. And people like Angelina Jolie and like George Clooney and like this new wave of cool like A-list Hollywood celebrities that right around this time, I think it was actually Trevor Nielsen, I want to say, who more recently was like fun. He was bundling money with like Eileen Getty and like one of RFK's kids to like give to Extinction Rebellion in 2019. And he had also built this like threat detection company for like Wall Street that was like founded with a CIA officer. And he was like, I think the director of special projects for the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And I think even before that, there was a big New Yorker article about him. I think he was like a pioneer in approaching really big A-list celebrities around like 2008, 2009, 2010, people like Kobe Bryant, George Clooney, Leonardo DiCaprio, Angelina Jolie, and getting them to like really hype up these like pet celebrity causes and kind of using it to like boost their clout and like career and all this other stuff. But I remember that New Yorker article was very critical that like, for example, like Kobe Bryant, RIP, like didn't actually... I think he was supposed to give a ton of money to like a homeless shelter, and he just sort of like never did, and was like, so they made these big promises that blah, 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 blah. But you did see a few of these people, particularly George Clooney, get involved in all kinds of weird sus shit with all kinds of shady people around like particularly Darfur, which, borders Uganda, right?
Similar, yeah, exactly. Basically the same situation. Yeah, Save Darfur.
Save Darfur.
Which is weird because like that was also the headquarters kind of the people who were like imperiling Darfur. So it wasn't really like, I guess in a way
wasn't
Darfur
that where
was like
Kony,
under threat, but it was still a weird slogan, kind of like Stop Kony. Like,
well,
just,
and
like,
also
not really,
at this time, wasn't like Kony allegedly hiding out in Darfur?
Well, it kind of has to do
very
with,
unclear.
I feel like, he was connected with the Sudan. And I think that like the Sudanese government did in some way. Like there's a deep like, animus between Uganda and the Sudan, like in many ways. Not all Ugandans, not all Sudanese, but like, there you don't tend to like each other. So, and there's, a history of conflict between them,
Definitely.
And the
Intrigues.
like sort of internal, and the internal like rebellious groups are often like associated with either by implication, like they're either implied to be associated with or believed to be, or they actually are associated with, like, the governments of the other. So the LRA, I think, was kind of supported by the government of Sudan. But I mean, it's also like a weird thing where like South Sudan, like the break off of South Sudan was like a big project for like the Obama administration. And I feel like that was tied to like some of this interest like in Uganda that was around Kony 2012, but also like preceded and succeeded it. It's weird, but yeah, and I think that there was even like that famous picture that was emerged in the initial backlash where you had like Jason Russell posing with like bazookas with like the SPLA, which was like, the South Sudanese rebel group.
Absolutely. And he did get, like it's never a good idea. If anyone wants to go be an American war tourist in a foreign country, not always a good idea to pose with a cool gun, with a bunch of based rebels, who are fighting bad guys. Exactly. It might come back to bite you later on. It might not age well. But
I mean, that's the thing. Like their approach was like straight up, like even though they would kind of do this like Christian thing of like, we don't want to shoot him, we don't want to kill him, we want to stop him, which is like hilarious because like everything that material they wanted to do was to support like an incredibly like corrupt government that was implicated in basically every single human rights abuse that they could charge Kony with, which they did, which they totally could, and that he is 100% guilty of. Like, but that also basically applied to the Ugandan government, and they basically provided them with logistical support to like go after and like seek kind of like vengeance against this guy, but also like his army, which was mostly comprised of like captive children. So like, when you have like a convenient boogeyman like Bin Laden or like ISIS or Kony, it's great, like everything's justified. Like, I think we can agree, they're pretty bad guys, but like around them, like when you're like, attacking them or like you're helping the drones, come after them, like it's going to be the captive kids who die, so like practically, with any of these groups.
It's
like
so
no one's
contradictory.
in it as like a blah blah zombie, there's not like a video game. Yes.
No, not at all. Yeah. I think I should just mention because it was actually weird. So I had the strange distinction of being a little bit aware of this group before Kony 2012 came out. And I don't know if I told you about this before, but I think around the end of college, I was taking this like documentary filmmaking class, and my professor would screen movies all the time. And one week she screened this movie that was like, oh yeah, these guys are like young film school students who like went to Africa and they ended up like going to Uganda and discovered this whole world of like child soldiers. So she screened for us Invisible Children, The Rough Cut. Oh my
God.
Which is the first film. This would have been in like maybe 2009. So I guess at the time, like it wasn't like released in theaters, but they were touring the country for several years. I think they went to Uganda in like 2003, 2004. And then they came back to America and they edited kind of this rough cut, like, I don't know, hour-long documentary. A lot of the footage is reused in Kony 2012, but that was really the impetus for this whole like movement. So at the time, I think the way the movie was introduced to me, I didn't even realize that this was like an NGO. I just thought like the movie was called Invisible Children and they made a documentary and they're filmmakers, like that simple as. And I remember watching it actually and being like, oh, wow, this is like pretty good and kind of interesting. And it didn't like, I mean, I think going back and looking at it now, you would see all the same kind of like manipulative, exploitative, like whitewashed, like kind of bullshit that you would see in Kony 2012. But the movie wasn't necessarily trying to get you to do anything, or it was telling a story about this horrible phenomenon of child soldiers and the Civil War thing. And it didn't even, I think, focus like so much on like Kony himself. It was more just about what the victims had gone through. So in that sense, people like Jacob, who's like kind of held up as like my best friend, who he interviews, back then and then uses as like a main character in Kony 2012. Right. And so, I watched it and then it just kind of like slipped out of my mind. And I never heard about Invisible Children after that. And then suddenly, like several years later, like boom, Kony 2012 comes out. And I'm like, hey, wait a minute. Like I remember these motherfuckers. Like these guys, like, they made that movie, and now they've turned it into like an NGO movement. And I feel like by 2012, I had also, I think of maybe around the time I first watched Invisible Children was the first time I had sort of discovered a lot of the like Liberia stuff, which I kind of researched, like years ago. And I would say that I've learned way more in like subsequent years, but I think even by 2012, I was familiar enough. I was familiar enough with some of the shit that had gone on in Liberia and Sierra Leone, like in the 90s, which had a huge use of child soldiers and these like charismatic warlords and blah, blah, blah. And, people like Charles Taylor, et cetera. And I knew about like the extreme, like complicated nature of all of these conflicts, and that often picking one group as like, these are the good guys and like these guys are evil, it really doesn't hold up to scrutiny. And oftentimes I had even begun to suss out by that point that sometimes there seemed to be some like ulterior motives from like Western organizations and governments to pick who were the good guys and the bad guys, and basically whitewash the crimes of one and then totally demonize the other, and basically depending on whatever they wanted to get out of it, whatever resources they wanted to extract or whatever government they wanted to overthrow and things like that. So when I saw this like very naive like Christian theater kid movie come out talking about, and I don't think I didn't know anything about Kony beyond seeing that Invisible Children rough cut, but I could just tell right away that like, oh no, like this is some bad shit. Like this is, and I also remember like being on social media and watching people get psyoped by it like in real time. Like everybody, it was some real like post a black square on Instagram kind of energy, if you know what I'm saying. It's still with us today, but I think this was really like this is a formative moment in the history of kind of like political mimetic warfare on social media and like weaponizing the internet as like this sentiment machine, like this affect machine to like get people to support something that they really don't understand because it's been boiled down to basically a meme. Even though it's a 30-minute film, it's not spending 30 minutes like breaking things down for you so much. It's just giving you, it's like a series of flashy meme factoids that are like very cleverly crafted to make you want to do like take action, basically would do what they want to do and support that. So I was just watching like people that I knew like just get took by it. That's why they got like rage posted on Facebook and it was like, this is fucking stupid, but it was just like, it was like disturbing to me. It was like disturbing that like so many people were just like, wow, like Kony 2012. Yeah. And, I guess it was also for people that are maybe confused, like the conceit. I mean, we'll get into the film, I think just in a sec, but the conceit of the film is that, 2012 was an election year, and with all this partisanship going on, all this politics going on, that there are so many things we can't agree on, but one thing both the left and the right can agree on is that Kony needs to go. And so that was the idea, is like, we're gonna this is the campaign to catch Kony in 2012 with like a based like neoliberal neocon like bipartisan alliance of people.
Right.
And they'll cover the night and blah, blah, blah. He also funnily says in the very beginning, like, this video will like self-destruct on like December 31st, 2012. It's still there.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Word.
But okay. So maybe we should now, we've riffed for a half hour. Maybe we should start walking through the experience. It's still up, by the way. That's why we laugh. Like, it's still there. And Kony Part 2. They're both there. And you can watch it. But I think, if we could walk through, because I think as a piece of propaganda, it is fascinating. And maybe we should give the devil his due for
it worked for like a time. It took a second for like all the people who actually like had knowledge of the situation to like be like, wait a minute, like you just completely steamrolled all nuance out of this. And this is like sus as hell for like both like cultural or like representational, exactly, like, and
but also political reasons.
Also political reasons.
Right now, there are more people on Facebook than there were on the planet 200 years ago. Humanity's greatest desire is to belong and connect. And now we see each other. We hear each other.
Grandpa, I love you. I love you.
Why want to take a picture?
We share what we love, and it reminds us what we all have in common.
Dug out alive and well after 7.5 days.
If you believe in yourself, you will know how to ride a bike. Rock and roll!
So now technically your device is on. Can you tell? Oh, that's exciting.
And this connection is changing the way the world works. Governments are trying to keep up.
No, we can't test the freedom.
And older generations are concerned.
Many people are very concerned about tomorrow. They could get worse next year.
The game has new rules. The next 27 minutes are an experiment. But in order for it to work, you have to pay attention.
For access to the full-length episode, subscribe to the Hour of Frequency at patreon.com/subliminaljihad.